It's time for the Unnamed Indie Comic Show with Skip and Ash. Talking about indie comics. Oh yeah. Talking about indie comics. Oh yeah. It's time for the Unnamed Indie Comic Show with Skip and Ash. It's time for the Unnamed Indie Comic Show with Skip and Ash. Talking about indie comics. Oh yeah. Talking about indie comics. Oh yeah. It's time for the Unnamed Indie Comic Show with Skip and Ash. It's time for 3, 2, 1. What's going on? You're watching another episode of the Indie Comic Show. My name is Ash. Joining me as always is the man with the plan, Skip and Tosh. And this is a special late night edition of the show. We figured we couldn't do it at the normal scheduled time. We were going to postpone. We didn't want to postpone, so we're doing it. We're doing it late night. Skip, how are you? Thanks for joining me.
Skip is doing pretty good here on the late night version of the Unnamed Indie Comic Show, coming at you live from None of Your Business. Ash, I'm doing fantastic. How are you this evening?
Oh boy, you're extra sultry tonight.
I am.
Is this the Sacktown Skip that I'm talking to?
Can we not talk about that? We lost to the Wolves tonight, the T-Wolves. We got beat by 10. So now, tonight, I'm just town Skip. There's no sack.
Wow, that's embarrassing.
I'm bearing my ass right now. So yes, I would say so.
I would not want to show my face if I were a Kings fan. That would just be really terrible to have that keep rubbing in your face. So
that's why I'm not doing the video tonight. There will be no recap of Sacramento's loss tonight. I'll have to do the walk or the recap of shame tomorrow morning.
Oh, well, I am glad that you can join me. And, hey, we got quite a little active audience here late night. I was worried that we wouldn't have any because we were doing it late. But I was like, who cares? We'll just do it. But we got some people here. So thank you guys all. They're joining us live in chat. I'm going to go ahead and give the opening spiel as I always do, in case you're a first-time listener. The Unnamed Indie Comic Show is a podcast format show broadcast live on YouTube first, where we geek out about indie comics. It's not a review show. We're not here to be super critical or anything like that. This is really to be joyful about the books that we love and geek out about them. And that's what we're going to talk about. So because it's a show format, it's not really a Q&A. We're not really going to interact with the chat as much as other types of you might be used to. But that doesn't mean we don't want your chats. Believe me, they definitely inform some of the things we talk about. And we may actually interact with them indirectly. So please give us your opinions as we're talking about it. This show is for you. The reason we broadcast it live is because we want to share our joy with you. Unfortunately, we can't have about 50 people all in a stream at the same time talking. So Skip and I will be your mouths. But please, that sounded really weird, Skip. But that's where we are. If you're listening to this after the fact, either on a replay or through the wonderful world of podcasting, thank you for joining and hearing us. And you can find these broadcasts live most Wednesdays on the YouTubes on the channel Ash on Comics. That's me. So there we go. We got past all that explanation stuff, the exposition, if you will.
I like that.
Yeah. Indie comics. Any exciting indie comics? Well, actually, you know what? We had a plan. We should probably stick to it.
Stick to the plan, Mad Dog. Stick to the
Stick to it. All right. So, one of the things we do, we talk about the new comics that came out during the week. And Skip and I are both a user of this app/website called League of Comic Geeks. And that's what I have up for the live viewers to see. And it's a really cool system to use to like keep track of the books you buy, make a virtual pool list. They've actually incorporated, some stores are using this where you can actually have your pull list on here work with your store. That's pretty cool. There's a lot of features. I'm not going to really go into it, but that's what's on the screen. And I have filtered out Marvel and DC because this is an indie show. And the order of the books are based on the popularity of the users of this site. And one of the things we do is we just talk about some of the new books, kind of using this almost like a comic book shelf. If we were at a store, it's like a virtual store, and just kind of seeing what catches our eye and talking about those. Skip, we got 14 books up here. Any of these catching your eye if you're walking through the store and seeing them on the shelf?
Absolutely. Primordial is one that is definitely catching my eye. I read issue number one. I enjoyed it, especially the art. I did decide to hold off on it and wait for the trade on this, just because the pace of Lemire's stories, although he is the pace master, sometimes it could still be a little slow for my liking. So I've decided to trade rate that one. But everybody who is picking it up are looking for a very off kilter story, uh, rooted in history with a bit of, or actually, I would say with a heavy heap of kind of more experimental and non traditional panel layouts and arts. I highly suggest Primordial. What about you, Ash?
I have been fortunate enough to read the first two issues of Primordial, and I very much enjoy it. Um, you're kind of right about what you're saying about the pacing. What I've noticed about Lemire, being the pace master as we've dubbed him, he knows sometimes stories need a nice, quick, intense pace, and some stories do better on that slow burn. I like to compare this to Gideon Falls was a famous book of his, and that felt like a slow burn. Primordial feels a lot in that same type of vein of writing. So I think, would you see that? Would you say that's kind of a fair analogy?
I think it's spot on, especially since like you said, this is the creative team of Gideon Falls, so they kind of already have this chemistry established, and it kind of carried over into this story, just with it being a different subject matter and a little bit more, like I said, experimental kind of art and page layout. But I think that's spot on, Ash.
Sweet, yeah. So I'm enjoying this. Um, I'm very curious to see where it goes. I see how long it lasts, but the last issue number 2, was very interesting. It had a dog in it, so I was we on the last episode we kind of joked around how if you have anything musical in your book, Skip was gonna buy it. I'm kind of It's like almost that way with me with dogs. You put a dog in your story, and I'm like, oh, what? And yeah, there's this Russian dog that's primarily featured in the story of issue number 2, and I was just, I want. But anyways, so yeah, pulls on my heartstrings. Now, the one book that's really on my notice here, when I look on this wall, is Radio Apocalypse. And this is because it is Rom V, and I have recently jumped on the Rom V bandwagon. Trying to blow this up here so for the users to see better. The Radio Apocalypse number 1 by Vault Comics came out today, and I was like, you know what? I missed the boat on Layla Starr, and I regret it, because that is for sure my number 1 miniseries of 2021, and it's unlikely at this late venture that anything's going to surpass it, especially since it's so good that it may not be surpassed for years. I was shocked at how much I liked Layla Starr. And so I'm like, I don't want to miss Radio Apocalypse. I'm going to jump on this. So I know that they had a, you're going to be, see, here's this theme here, Skips, if you will.
Okay.
They had I forgot I don't have this up so you can see what I'm seeing. I need to be better about this and share my screen with Skip behind the scenes so he can not sit there and just listen. Let me in. Come on in, Skip. It's hard for me to do things. I don't multitask very well. So there we go. They have a variant cover of Radio Apocalypse done by Megan Hutchin Cates. Now, is that Donnie Cates' wife?
Yes, because I remember last year I got the Ice Cream Man issue number 21 variant that she did, the Dr. Manhattan variant, and then I saw more and I noticed there was a Cates at the end, and I was like, oh, that's Donnie Cates' wife. So yes, that is correct.
So I saw this. Now, here, see, I'm not doing it very well. I'm not very eloquent, but you're going to see how I'm tying in this all together. Last episode, music gets Skip, dogs get me, and then I saw this cover, and it's basically an old phonograph machine. For those of you that don't know what that is, that's a record player that has the horn, the old timey thing, and it's got a big pink dog drooling, like looking into the horn on it. And I was like, that's kind of like symbolic of Skip and I, like he's the music and I'm the animal. And I was like, not only do I want this book, I'm like, this cover, I mean, it's like Providence. I need to get this. So I called my store up this morning and I was like, please pull me this cover. And they're like, oh, we didn't order that book. So I don't get any Radio Apocalypse at all because they just decided apparently Vault's not. And this is the sad state of affairs and why we do a show like this, because there's too many 500 comics come out every month. And my store's got a big wall, but you need you need like the wall of China to hold every book that comes out. And they just don't order a lot of things. And Vault is a very small publisher. And unfortunately, I guess they're not Rom V fans. And I'm like, no, womp. So I gotta go hunt down this cover somewhere. Hopefully, it's not too hard to find.
And so here's this. So on the flip side, don't hate me, Ash, please. So on my way home from a family dinner, of course, Diamond was late today. So when I went to go get my books, they weren't ready. And I come back around to pick up my books on the way home. And I go in there and I'm like, oh, that's right. I forgot to tell them to put Radio Apocalypse on my pull list. I walk in, I go to the wall. There's cover A, which is the one that I wanted, and there's the Simmons cover as well. The artist from Department of Truth. I just walk in and both of them are right there, and I just snatch them. And then to add insult to injury, I think, actually, yes, I said this on the show a few weeks back. I won a 99-cent bid on eBay for Paradiso by Rom V issues 1 through 4. Not only did I grab those Radio Apocalypse issues as soon as I walk into the shop, I walk in the back, I look for a different comic, I don't see it, I raise my head up, and there's a Paradiso like marker, for like in the back issues, and I go and they have the last 4 issues, so I have the all 8 of the Paradiso issues. So I was just like racking it up on the Ram V train tonight, baby.
Man, I guess I got to move to Sacramento because I thought San Diego was like this comics mecca. We got the biggest comics convention in the world, but nope. I was disappointed. Very disappointed.
Hey, move on up, Ash. I got a room waiting for you. Come on up.
Moving on up. All right. So there's some other good stuff on here. This looks like this indie's doing pretty well. A lot of people liking Last Ronin. So there's this Last Ronin book featured there. King Spawn, of course. I mean, Spawn is, I guess it's Spawn. It's been around forever. The Todd Father. Walking Dead is so good that they can just reprint it and people keep buying it. And that's on the list. Eat the Rich. I've heard some people that I like liking it. I don't know really anything else about it other than the title. Do you know anything about this book?
Ethan Rich, same. I've heard people talking about it, and I was interested at first, but then I heard people talking about issue number 2, and ever since they've been talking about it since issue 2 and on, it has not been as favorable as issue number 1, and even a little confusion. So I was like, all right, well, there goes my attention.
Also,
Oh,
go ahead.
uh-huh.
Go ahead, man.
I was gonna jump out on Not All Robots. So tonight, I ended up I kept hearing people talk about Not All Robots, and I hadn't read. I read one other Mark Russell book before. I think it was the. Oh gosh, I can't even remember which one it was. But Jimmy was talking about him more and more. So I randomly found a Not All Robots issue number 1. Didn't read it all last week. Finished it tonight. While I was at dinner, I snuck away, finished it, and then I ended up leaving it for my cousin. And while I was at the shop, I found another number 1. So I bought that one because it was a different cover. I have to say, Ben, who is in the chat, Bunkmaster B, my man Ben, is absolutely right. That is one of the funniest, most ironic books that I have read easily this year in comics. I was looking for number 2, and when I didn't find it, that's when I saw the Paradiso book. But I very much am going to be adding this. Well, I can't add it to my. I could, but there's only one more issue. It's a mini series. It's only 5 issues, but I'm grabbing all of the rest of them. It is hitting on all of the funny and irony cylinders for your boy Skip.
Oh, well, that is good to hear. I struggle with Mark Russell books, so I didn't pay any attention to this, but it goes to that AWA brand. These guys, we talk about this, we've talked about it before, just seem to know what they're doing in the publishing department. And if this book is that good, maybe it's because Mark Russell's working under real editors. Could that be? It's bringing out his A game. I don't know, but I have yet to read an AWA book that was bad.
Yeah, same. And I had heard some things about Mark Russell, both good and bad, but there just frankly hadn't been any books of his that struck my interest. And when I first saw this book, it did strike my interest, and I think I let a little bit of bias kind of stop me from grabbing the issue number 1 originally. But I'm glad I kept hearing people speak favorably about it, because I broke through my barrier. I grabbed the number 1 when I saw that there was one. And to finish reading it tonight, I was like, I am like, just off of issue number 1, I'm absolutely following through to issue number 5 and seeing how this story turns around, because the way that it was slightly rushed in the issue number 1, and I get it, it's a 5-issue series, but only ever so slightly, and it is hitting on so many cylinders. Like Ben Uncle says, definitely up for Satire King, because he's all over it.
Oh, good. Well, I might maybe I'll give it a try, and try to overcome my biases.
If you can, if not, there's so many more comics out there. It's not much of a loss at all. As a matter of fact, what are some other ones that you're seeing? Because I see we got another row there.
Yeah, the second batch here, Chicken Devil was a book that came out a month ago. So issue number 2 is out today. I got a chance to read the first issue, and I did not expect anything out of this book. I just thought it had a really wonky cover that caught my eye, and I was like, this looks absurd. I'm a fan of absurdity, so when it's done in a certain way. And I have to say, Chicken Devil was very entertaining. There were things about it that I didn't particularly, there were some things I could critique about it, but overall, the product, I was like, you know what? For a small press publisher like Aftershock,
yeah,
I'm not going to be too hard, right? Like I gauge my criticism like based on the level, almost like sports, right? If you're a minor league team, I don't expect you to play like a AAA player, right? Mm-hmm. If you're on the all-star team, you better play like an all-star. Chicken Devil, I was like, Aftershock, who's after? I don't know. I read it, I was like, this is darn good. It had really good pacing. It had really good energy. it had this sort of like almost like paranoia that like it conveyed to the reader very well.
Absolutely.
And I like that. That's what a writer should be able to do, is make you feel things, not just tell you a story. I know that's one of your kind of critiques on books, is like exposition, which is why I mentioned the word exposition earlier. And anyone can just be like, oh, and then the person crossed the road and then they did this. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's more exciting when you can tell that story in a way that it's like what it felt like to cross the road, when it felt like, and Chicken Devil, I think, did a lot of that, put you in the shoes of these characters and made you feel that tension. Almost the same kind of way that the TV show Breaking Bad was so good at, and putting you in the shoes of this, So check it out. If you thought that was interesting and you weren't quite sure because you were like, it's Aftershock, I think it's going to be a good book for some people. What about you? Anything on this list I see a couple that I think you might mention.
You know it. Definitely down with the Chicken Devil. Definitely Breaking Bad levels of tension. Absolutely. For a comic book. And then, of course, Gun Honey #3. This book pulls me in more and more and more. And I think, I don't want to take away from the quality of the book, but I did have lower expectations for it, and that could play a role. I also don't want to ignore that either, but I have to say, like, it continues to impress me, so much so that I thought I would just get cover A, and I liked cover A, nice Bill Sienkiewicz cover, thought I'd be done with it. I am on, like, I'm looking for another cover from issue #1 and issue #2. Like, I can't get enough of these covers. Like, I continue to fall more and more like over my own feet for like these McGinnis covers, the dude that does like the oil paintings. I think part of that, I have to blame some of it on Eric Breen, because he was showing me some of his hard case crime novel collection, and he was showing a lot of art pieces by the artist McGinnis, who is like 95 years old and still doing these amazing like paintings. I don't get it, but anyway, so now I'm looking for a McGinnis cover, and issue #3 I just picked up before I got over here, so I can't wait to read it. But what about you, Ash? What are some of the other ones that you might be interested in?
Well, I pick up Blade Runner Origins. #8 came out today, so that's still a book I'm collecting. I am a little bit behind on it, but I'm a sucker for cyberpunk, and I like how Blade Runner takes cyberpunk and like detective noir and puts it together. And those are two genres that I'm kind of like really into right now, and it kind of gives me both. I'm still riding a high off of that Blade Runner 2049 movie, which is one of my top movies in the last decade. So that's a book that I've been getting. I've talked ad nauseum about it. But what catches my eye is looking at this is Goon. Goon is a indie book, right? And I say indie because indies used to be books that people produced out of their house, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? That's what indies used to be. Nowadays, there's all these other publishers. You got Dynamite, Boom Studios, Image. There's Aftershock. I'm struggling to think off the top of my head, but you guys all know. Like, there's a dozen different publishers out there. IDW, Titan. I guess I should just look at here at the screen. I could see Valiant. Indies are almost really just minor league mainstream books a lot of times. But Goon is a small press. Albatross Funny Books is the name of the publisher. And this is the type of comic that would have caught my eye back in the day. This is the type of stuff I used to gravitate towards indies. I've heard so many good things. Goon is one of those books that has its die-hard fans. It's been around for ages. And I was like, what is this? And I just hear on the periphery. But what's catching my eye really is that it's #14 is out today. And, you know, we talk about this all the time. One of my big pet peeves in comics is just the ad nauseum of mini series over and over, just mini. No more ongoing comics. I enjoy collecting an ongoing series and just looking forward month after month, getting the next issue, adding it to my collection, watching it grow, and just having it in my life for years. That's one of my joys of comics. And I just, you know, there can be great miniseries, you know, 5 issues and it's a fantastic story, but then it's gone, you move on. It's a different animal for me. And I wish I would have known Goon was going to be like this, because I probably would have put it on my collection, you know.
Right.
And maybe I still will. I don't know. I'm going to think about it. I don't know. I'm bravo to the guys doing that comic. I hope it lasts for a good long time and fans are happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to hear like stories like that. Just people that love comics, just making comics, and if they can sustain it like that, it's a huge win. Like you know, making comics as a whole, from what I understand, for all the people that I know that do it professionally, is already not easy. If you're independent, it's even that much harder. And if you're like, you know, no funding type independent, it's that much more difficult to get it done. So shout out to them for the serious labor of love.
Well, we are now towards the dregs, as I call them, which I probably shouldn't, but the less popular books. I don't want to go through every single book because like there is so many and we are short on time. But as I'm scrolling down, is there anything that's like catching your eye that deserves to just not be forgotten?
Let's see. I see you scrolling. I am outside of course, you know, a book that you would mention that I'll leave it to you to mention. I'm not. Oh, is that the Merca and Dolfo? No, that's not the Merca and Dolfo Red Sonja. Never mind. No, I'm not seeing anything. For me, this was a very, very light week, and every now and then I let something slip through the cracks, and sometimes I catch it on here. So that's why I'm glad we do these, because sometimes I got to go back and be like, I forgot to get this book.
Well,
But
and some of these
I'm
books,
not seeing it.
Some of these books, you know, especially like we're talking about the dregs, they may be amazing and we don't know because there's just too many books to read. And then like 6 months from now, you'll hear, you know, like one of the books I remembered this happening is that We Live. That series shot into the stratosphere, but it was like over by the time I heard. And then when you want, if I was like, oh, I'm gonna go get an issue. Oh, issue number 1's $100 now. You're like, oh, Jesus.
Okay, I see something. Okay. I see something. So one of the people on YouTube, the comics YouTuber that I trust the most with taste, we have the closest taste, is Rockin' Robbie Billups from Pop Culture Philosophers. He has been ringing the bell of wasted space for I don't know how long now, and I feel like so conflicted by the fact that I have not stopped to check it out. And issue 25 is the last issue too. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to find as much wasted space as I can. And I'm going to get started from the top of the series, because Rockin' Robbie Billups pretty much never leads me wrong. And he has been singing the praises of this book for so long. It's about time that I did the right thing and not be the fool that I've been with some of these titles that have recommended to me.
You see, if I had stated the same thing you did, I would have said you, but that's because I'm a loyal partner, Skip.
I appreciate you, Ash. I'm gonna find many ways to compliment you for the rest of the night now. Thanks.
Why don't you go marry Rockin' Robbie Billups or whatever his name is?
Well, if he would propose, then we might have a deal on the table.
Oh, there you go.
As of right now, it hasn't
see what
happened.
happens. Oh.
See how the night goes.
Stay tuned, kids. All right, let's move on to our shout-out section. This is where we kind of give some attention to some particular books that we've been reading since the last time we did a show. That we just kind of want to give a shout-out. There's so many books. We feature one book typically on an episode that we really dive into, but there's other good books out there. And I wish we just had more time to do a show a day, maybe, but we don't. So one of the books I want to give a shout out, and I just caught up recently is Snow Angels. This is available currently only on Comixology. It is a Comixology original. It is by Jeff Lemire and also the artist Jacques. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly. And you've probably heard of him. He did a lot of Batman books. And this is I'm not a super big Jacques fan, but this is a great pairing for this book because Jacques' muddy art really adds to the tension and the stress and the fear and everything that this book is really about. Snow Angels is part Terminator, part Predator, part Mad Max, like part it's characters trapped. They're in a wasteland environment, but it's not like desert. It's all ice. So like imagine Hoth or something. They live in a trench. And it's they're pretty primitive, but you can tell that there once was technology because they reveal machines in the land, and they live by certain credos and superstitions and different things that primitive people have, and it is a fantastic thriller. When we said Jeff Lemire is the master of pacing, this book is my definitive example of that. Every issue of this is just perfectly paced till you get to the end, and it leaves you on this like some sort of cliffhanger or a hook so that you will be back for more, and then the next issue will play off of that and feed you what you're wanting. It doesn't string you along forever like, if you remember that TV show Lost. It's like J.J. Abrams, I just like to ask questions all the time and never give you answers. Lemire does. The big question, next book gives you the answer, but then he reveals another question, and you're like, oh my god, and you read the next issue and like, oh, that's what's going on. Oh my god, now it's this, and it's just constantly, and he does it over and over and over, and the way he unveils, like, peels back the onion, and just, I love this book, and this is my first Comixology original book that I had any interest in reading, and it's a slam dunk banger. And it doesn't get enough attention because most comic fans aren't into digital, and I can understand that. I get the Comixology unlimited service because it's a great way to read back issues at a cheap price. And there's a ton of stuff in their library that you can read. Plus, you get these originals that I didn't used to care about, but now we're adding some new talent to them, and the line is getting better. It's a 10-issue series, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring it back up today, partly because I caught up. I'm on the penultimate issue. The next issue will be the 10th final issue. But also, there's a solicit here, Dark Horse Comics. You have to wait till February, but we'll be releasing the first trade paperback. So you will be able to get this physical. So for those of you out there like, yeah, it's all good, Ash, but I don't read comics on a computer. No problem. You can get a nice paper from Dark Horse Comics. Put this on your radar. I love this book.
Snow Angels, I watched you read some issues, and it was very, very, very interesting. I might fall back into it later, especially the way that my book that I have to recommend has been pulling me, which is also a Lemire book. Yeah, you got it. We're getting right over there. Maze Book 3. Jeff Lemire has a way of just pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling you in. And it's like, I don't want to say you don't see it coming, but at the same time, sometimes by the time you realize it, you're in too deep already, and you're like, I have to see this through. There's no way I can abort, this emotional rut. And I mean that in the most pleasant and pleasurable way that Jeff Lemire has pulled me into. Again, another big shout out to Yule from Fantastic Comics for getting me on some new Lemire, because I think the last book that I had read from him actually completed was the Moon Knight run that he had done some years back. I want to say about 3 years ago. Maybe actually at this point, it might have been 3 or 4 years ago. But this book, a father, whose daughter had passed away over a decade ago, getting a call that he believes is from her. She loves mazes, and he's starting to see the city as a maze, and he believes that it is her way of leading him back to her. You don't know if you want to like escort him to a place for help or like weep with him, but you're watching a man with a broken heart and not knowing if his mind is beginning to break as well. And issue number 3 that I just came out just took you deeper down to that space, but also we got a little bit of a reveal into the next level or the next layer that we're being put through. Shout out to Tom Mueller. It looks like Tom Mueller helped design the particular cover that you're looking at right there, Ash, and I love Tom Mueller. And Tom Mueller is actually going to come back around to be relevant to the main books that we are covering tonight. So be prepared for that. We got a lot of ties that are connecting, and oddly enough, that red line that's on the ground is part of the story. His daughter had this red sweater that she would wear, and the father is starting to see that red string and believes that that's also the way his daughter's going to lead him through the maze back to her. So a lot of connections tonight.
All right, this is pulling on my heartstrings here. I need to check this book out because Lemire is he's definitely one of the top writers. He's not always firing on all cylinders, and and sometimes he just has, and this is a good thing actually. Objectively, it's a good thing. He has different styles that he writes in. He doesn't just like write one way, and some writers do, and that's great. If you love that particular way that they write, you're gonna be into them. Jeff Lemire, he's very talented and he can write in different styles, and sometimes those particular styles don't appeal to me as much as others. So I say that he's hit or miss for me, and it's really just more about my taste. But I know that when he's on, when he is appealing to my taste, there's few out there that are better. So you make a really good case for this book. Before we go on to our next shout out, though, I do want to kind of not ignore some people that were in the chat that shouted out. Jimmy in the chat did want to shout out Doctor Who, which is a book that came out today. He's a big Doctor Who fan, and apparently he likes the comics. So there we go. That's represented by Jimmy. And Ben Uncles also seconded. My dog. I don't know if you can hear my dog drinking right now, but she always picks the best time. Seconded Russell for his satire and comics and that Not All Robots book. So another opinion on that. And what was the other one? He also says that May's book is the Dad Feels book. And I think that was all the shout outs. I don't want to miss any. If I miss any, I apologize, guys. But I do try.
I'm gonna throw one out there real quick too. So oddly enough, another tie that binds. A lot of connections going on. So you mentioned your love for cyberpunk. You know that we share that. We are two fans of cyberpunk settings and cyberpunk stories. I am a patron of Indigo Gaming, who has made the best cyberpunk 1 and 2 like documentaries basically on YouTube. So check those out from Indigo Gaming. Cyberpunk 1, Cyberpunk 2. Number 3 dropped last week. And I learned that I thought that William Gibson, writer of Neuromancer, created the term The Matrix. I found out in part 3 that just came out, it was actually Doctor Who TV show. That was the first mention of the Matrix being like a virtual world that a mind would be sent into.
Wow.
So shout out to you and Jimmy and Indigo Gaming and more ties that are connecting here on this Indie Comic Show podcast. That's why people got to tune in here, because come for the indie comics, stay for all the nerd knowledge that gets dropped in the midst of the show.
Right. Oh, there's one I missed. Ben Uncles says Campisi. don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Campisi dropped 2 weeks ago, but the book continues to be one of his favorites. And I did read the first issue of Campisi because next to dogs and comic, I'm a fan of dragons, and it has a book as dragons. I was like, oh, this looks neat. I believe it's an Aftershock book. It didn't completely grab me, but it was very compelling. And I could definitely see why a lot of people would be into it. My biggest fault was more to do with the art. Again, small press comics, I know you're not going to be getting top name artists on the books. But the story was very interesting world. It's kind of like if like mobsters met dragons and dragons have been asleep all these years. Really cool ideas. If you like cool ideas, that book had it. Interesting characters. I would be very much interested to read more. So shout out to that book from Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
So moving on, my next shout out is another Comixology original. I'm just going to keep it in theme tonight. This is by one of Skip's favorite writers, Scott Snyder, a.k.a. Snot Writer. And no, I say that. And I very much like Scott. And, you know, he's a writer for me that I very much enjoy. When I got back into comics, I didn't really know who was who anymore because all the old, I mean, there were still some people from my day writing comics like Frank Miller just seems to be going on forever. May he live for a long time. But there was a lot of new people, and I was like, at the time, Scott Snyder was one of the top of the hill, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll read this Scott Snyder guy. Everyone seems to love him. And I enjoyed his work. And so I continued to follow more Scott Snyder books, and I continued to enjoy. And so I just considered myself a fan. Now, there's several indie books of his that I get. I get Undiscovered Country, and I get Noctera. I enjoy both of those very much. But they're nothing I scream from the mountaintops about. You know, they're nothing. They're just good. I very much enjoy them. I get that people maybe won't, whatever, but I think they're very solid. Clear is a book that's part of his Comixology original deal that he's doing. He's got like 8 books coming out through Comixology. He did some big deal with Amazon, who owns Comixology. You know, whatever. There's other books that he's doing that are fine, but this one really stood out to me. Really, and this is issue number 2, and it is staying in line with what we were talking about with like Blade Runner. It is a very cyberpunky Blade Runner type of book, and it's a bit of crime noir. It reminded me of Blade Runner in that sense, that it's got a cyberpunk setting and a detective crime noir story. It also has a little bit thematically that movie Strange Days, if anyone knows what that is.
Ah, yeah.
Movie written by my boy James Cameron. This book hit on all cylinders for me. It's got beautiful art by Francis Manapul that is some of the best I've seen him do, in my opinion. And I love the setting. I love the idea that's behind it. It's about in the future, everyone has got this technology. Everyone's kind of jacked in like to the net, if you will, and they're jacked in kind of like wirelessly. So you walk around and you basically just have internet in your head. Well, what that allows you to do is install sort of like programs and different things. And one of these things that they do is called Veils. And what Veils lets you do is put skins on the real world or your perception of the real world. So when you look at like a city street, you don't see what it really looks like in reality. You see the theme of whatever veil you purchased. You can have it be like an old Western town. You could have it be like Disney Main Street. You could have it be maybe some sci-fi, like whatever you could imagine. And there, people buy these. So no one sees what the world really looks like, except for the main character is Detective Dunes, and he doesn't like it, and he just keeps his veils turned off so he can see. But because everyone uses veils, the world has kind of gone all scummy and bad because no one keeps it up anymore because they don't have to. You can just turn on these filters and live in a delusion. And I thought that was an interesting backdrop to
It is.
create this detective story that ultimately ensues through it. And I was just entranced. Like, it starts off, and I know one of the things that Skip doesn't like about Snyder is he can be a little heavy on the exposition sometimes. It's one of his things that he does. And he does use a little bit here, but I think this, what really got me about this book is the things that I was thinking were exposition in the beginning really were actually more thematic once I understood where the story was going at the end. Because I finished the book and then I went back and I started going through. I was like, oh, I didn't no idea what I was reading in the beginning, like, because I didn't have the context yet. Once I finished the issue,
Right.
I was like, oh, now it's and I love when books can do that, or movies, especially when I can go and see it again and be like, oh, I didn't see that the first. Like, I love it that it makes me think and challenges me. So this is a book that I just wanted to shout out because even his, like, I tend to like Scott Snyder, but none of his other books really even do that as much as this one has. I just read this issue number 2, and it was good too. I'm very much enthralled in this. I'm kind of sad that this is not one of his actual physical books, because this is the best of them in my opinion.
And it's got Francis Manipul art, and my gosh, does he make things just look so tantalizing and textured, and like the expressions within his art are so layered. It was such a beautiful book to look at. Ash, while you were saying that, and I know I wrote you like a whole big old thing about how much I love Scott Snyder. Not. He is a fantastic human being, though. I mean, one of the nicest guys. But I did go ahead and I just borrowed this book. I just went right into Comixology. I hit the borrow button. After I finish my pull from this week and a few books that I had left over from last week, if I just have some time in between things, I'm gonna try to drink this down.
All right. I hope you can find some enjoyment out of it, because I know he's not your bag, but I just love it so much, and I wish for people to see the value, and I think we're all kind of that way, you know. Sometimes when you see something, you're like, it's so good to me, and then other people are like, nah, I don't get it. And you're just like, oh man.
I agree with that notion so much that I continue to say I continue to buy Brian Michael Bendis books, mostly the indie ones, but I continue to buy them because I want to see what people like my good friend Jimmy sees in his writing. And even again, I wrote you that long old thing, but I'm gonna give it a shot. Quick side note again, if you are one of the subscribers to Comixology, 2 of our favorite books that we've talked about on this stream so much lately that we really enjoyed, or at least earlier this year, are currently on there for unlimited. The whole volume number 1, well, it's only volume so far, of Erratic by Kari Andrews and my buddy Brian Reber are on there. So if you're a member, you can borrow those and you can read the whole series. The other one, which Ash was just talking about earlier, the issue number 1 of The Many Deaths of Layla Starr by Ram V and Felipe Andrade is also on Unlimited for Comixology. So rush over there, go borrow those, read them. Hope you enjoy them. Yeah, baby.
Very good. I'm glad you mentioned that. Erratic is one of my top books of recent times. And if you still are like, I don't even want to read it for free, or I don't want. It's only $9.99 for the trade paperback. Go get this book. It's fantastic.
Seriously.
All right, Skip. You get the last shout out, and this is a book that is pure Skip, in my opinion. Tell us about what's the furthest place from here.
I almost feel in this odd way between finishing up Homesick Pilots, like getting 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank, which is the same creative team as this book, and then reading this book amongst a few others that, like, I don't want to say I'm rediscovering my childhood, but in having teenage daughters, I am really tapping in to the time in my life between like 14 and like 22 that was just about like skateboarding and like hanging around my punk friends, even though I wasn't a punk, I was just rebellious, and like music and going buying records so I could sample them and make beats. Like all these books are like taking me to like some of my favorite times in life and some of my favorite things to do. And What's the Furthest Place from Here is another one of those books. Shout out to Tyler Boss and Matthew Rosenberg on this book. A really interesting setting of a world that seemingly does not have adults in it, and it seems like it is like the chief sin within this world of this book to grow old past a point to where you're no longer a child. And some really interesting things happen around like a young woman that's pregnant, and this opposing group that is coming up against the kids that have decided to use this old rundown record store as their fort, as their HQ. But so many things about this book, between Matthew Rosenberg's very lived in dialogue. I don't know if anybody's ever uttered that phrase before. And Tyler Boss's lines and his proportions. I just really literally love like his proportions to his characters, and literally his line weight. So much about it just like screams like that coming of age type story. This is, it's like take Stranger Things, but take some of the strange stuff, only some of the strange stuff out of it. Make them that much more older to where they can be that much more like repulsive type young people, and like put them in this world where like no adults allowed. If you're an adult, like you got to walk the plank type style. This book is really intriguing, and we still, there's still so much to explore within it. We don't fully know all of what there is, and supposedly beyond what they can see, there's a city out there, and some people don't believe that it's real and some people do. And now they are in a position where it might be worth their lives to go and find out, to see if the city is real, and if so, what's actually there. And it's tied into music, obviously. There was even a release for this that came with the vinyl. I did order it. I'm waiting for my copy to come in. But What's the Furthest Place from Here? If you're looking for a book that kind of has all of those things, and you just kind of want to live in that world where, I mean, maybe you are that age, or maybe you've gone past that, but there were some good times in your life regarding like rebellion and music, and just trying to figure out where you fit in the world, and how you're going to proceed with life going forward. This is a book worth checking out. And I loved Dead Dog's Bite by Tyler Boss. So once I found out that this book was coming out, I had to jump on it. And it's got some of those vibes in it with like a little bit of a different flavor with Matthew Rosenberg. So I'm stoked off.
Now, I took a peek at this book because I knew, I was like, this is a Skip book. He's going to be talking all about it. And I don't want to just sit here silent and not know anything. So I was like, I got to sneak a peek at this book. And I did.
Yeah.
And I want to say a couple of shout outs. Number one,
okay.
The page count on this book, 60 pages for $4.99. Thank you, creators, making this book, giving value to the customer. In an age where comics are going through the roof in price, and we're seeming to get less and less and less. We're a lot of people taking advantage and extorting fans of like, oh, well, they're doing it, let's raise our prices too. And it's just like, comics are super expensive. Inflation's through the roof. People don't have as much money in their pocketbooks. Thank you guys for making a comic that's not trying to extort. So anyways, to the value. I appreciate that. We don't talk about that enough. I like the setting of this book. I'm really partial to post-apocalyptic settings. What this book reminded me of a bit is Mad Max meets Hook.
Yeah, dude. Well, how come when I was reading it, I was like, bang, 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 all right. Like, oh, that's so funny that you say that. Perfect, Ash. Perfect.
And I love both those movies now, but it's a weird mashup.
Yes, it is. It's bizarre.
Now, I did not love this book, but as I was reading it, I was like, this is clear. I'm clearly not the target audience of this book. Um, I feel I've very much aged out of this book. I feel like it's targeting a generation, and I hate to say this, but I'm a middle-aged guy. Like, I just don't get some of the worldview, the, you know, that just the modern generation, you know, the Gen Z. This is a Gen Z book, has, and that's fine. Obviously, other people are, so it's not missing it. However, that being said, I thought it was a pretty well written book. I was still kind of compelled, even though I was like, I don't jive with these characters. I don't relate to them. The writing, the dialogue, the setting were very compelling. I never felt bored reading the book, and it is 60 pages. It kept me turning pages. I wanted to see where it went. And also, shout out to Rosenberg, who was someone I've never really been complimentary to as a writer. I really appreciated the way he crafted this story, where it just, there's a term for this in writing, and I can't pull it up. If anyone knows, put it in chat, or Skip, you may know. That a term in writing where it's where you hit the ground running. Like, you just start the story, you know, like in the middle of the story. Like Lucas did this in Star Wars. You didn't have to start with necessarily Act 1, like build it up to the origin. This book just picks up where the story's just going. And he doesn't spend time with exposition telling you how you got to this point, which I'm starting to see is something that you're not necessarily a fan, because Scott Snyder would have done that. He would have been like, okay, let me take 3 pages of exposition to tell you how we got to here.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, right.
And I'm okay with that, but I also can appreciate when you can just get in this, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Why are these kids in a record store? Part of that mystery and just joining into that story, and they're not taking time to be like, oh, by the way, you don't understand. Part of that not understanding is what makes it interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
And I really did enjoy that, and I think Rosenberg did solid writing here. And I think if you are the demographic for this book, you are going to be very happy with it, because, like I said, even me going, it's not really for me, I still enjoyed myself. Like, I still was like, oh, I could read another issue of this. Like, definitely. So good call on this book. I can see other people are enjoying this too. So great. I love to see, I like to see books do well.
Heck yeah, and it's only 3 issues too, so there's only two more of them at the same size, and that's the whole story.
Oh, I did not know that. And Ben Uncles, thank you. He says it's in media res, and that's right. I have to try to, those Latin terms I can never remember.
In media. Thanks,
medias res. But yeah, that's great. So let's get on to the final segment. Well, sort of the main feature, the main event. Ding, ding, ding. We are talking about a book tonight that I got because of Skip. I seem this is like a pattern, Skip. A lot of the books I'm reading. This is A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance. It is written by Rick Remender, who a lot of people know that name, and Andre Lima Uraho. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. With Chris O'Halloran and Russ Wooten also. Skip, tell us about this book.
This book is definitely a book of intrigue. So much of the heavy lifting is done by the visuals, which are fantastic visuals, especially for this type of story. Rick Remender, one of my favorite modern writers in comics, not known to be a super wordy guy, but what I like about Rick is similar to what you said about Jeff Lemire before. He can write, and I wouldn't say he's doesn't have maybe as the range in writing that Lemire does, but at the same time, he's really good at knowing when to use more words and pulling back and using words in different ways. So even going so far as like the manga style of sometimes having some of the story in the margins and stuff like that. So Rick is in this book, he's really pulling back how wordy he is, and he and Andrea Lima Araujo are really working together to have the visuals tell a lot of it. And since there's less dialogue, it forces you to pay closer attention to each panel, look all around the panel, and try to figure out what the heck is going on in this story. And Ash and I are excited to talk about it because this, when we talk about intrigue and plot, this is like intrigue is in the driver's seat. And I'm excited that we picked this up to take this ride with y'all because I am so excited to see what happens in this book. But right now, I don't know if I have very many clues. So it leads to a lot of theory crafting that we get to do.
Definitely. One thing that's been kind of critical about this book, and we're going to get into it, I think, and I want to combat it, I guess, or rebut it. A lot of people have been critiquing this book or just smearing the book, I guess. That it's really short on the dialogue. There's not a lot of writing, that they say. And as you see, as we get into this book, I think that's one of the best things about this book. And I think that a lot of these people are being, I don't want to say disingenuous, but I think they're being a little short-sighted. And writing isn't just about writing words. If you're a writer of a story, you're not just writing dialogue. You're not just writing narration boxes. That's not your job. That's included in your job when that's necessary. You're writing the whole kit and caboodle. When a character's walking down the street, the artist is going to render that for you, but you are creating that, right? If the character grimaces, the artist is going to show the character grimacing, but you wrote that. This story, this comic is a good textbook example where the writing is about showing. It's about what's going on in the story, not what people are saying out of their mouth. And there is dialogue in the book. It's not a completely silent book, but I would say it's over 50% silent. We'll see when we revisit it here in a second. But this is a great example of how to write that way. You know, if this were a movie, we wouldn't even question it because movies happen that way all the time. There's plenty of silent scenes in movies, but we're captivated because things are moving. This is an example of a book when you read it, it's imperative, in my opinion, that you read it with the pacing that the writer intends. And this is a mistake I make myself, and I used to make it even worse when I wasn't conscious of it. But I still have to control myself and be conscious, is not to blast through the pages, which is easy to do. Oftentimes we read as fast as we're able to read. And when there's less dialogue on a page, we hit that panel and we spend half a second on it and boom, we're gone. And you can do that. You can speed read, but you don't watch a movie on fast forward for a reason. You don't listen to songs at fast forward for a reason. They're best enjoyed at the proper pacing. And in a story like this, the art is drawn, the sequential art is designed to carry you through that pace. You should be, ideally, if you're able to, formulating sort of a movie in your mind as your brain kind of fills in what's happening between the panels. You know, panel A and panel B, you see two different scenes. Your brain fills in sort of an imaginary movie that connects those two panels. And when you get on the proper pace, you'll notice that becomes easier and easier to do. If you blast through it, your brain doesn't have time to, you know, it just becomes a bunch of flashes of images and it's not as cinematic. Anyways, I'm not telling you how you have to read comics. You read however is most enjoyable. I'm just giving you a way to consider maybe possibly getting more out of a particular book, and this one in particular. Skip, I will take up too much time if I keep blathering, so why don't you, I guess, just take us into the book, and however you want. We got 2 books to cover, so I guess just let you take the lead here, and we'll talk about it.
Sounds good. And no, I want to just take 10 seconds to say I really appreciate you calling out that there's more than one way to read comics. And the more that we give ourselves like the options and take advantage of them, the more joy we can pull out of comics. Because yes, it's easy to get caught up in kind of the, just read the words and go through the panels. But if we really take time and realize that comics are almost like different types of drinks. Some of them, like are like water, and you might just need to chug it down just to get it in your system to stay hydrated. And others are like a nice glass of bourbon that you need to sit there and take in, and even maybe sometimes like just let it sit on your tongue for a little while. And others are like wine, where you might even want to let it roll around on different parts of your tongue. But comics can be read in different ways. Take advantage of all the different ways so you can get as much out of these comics as you can, because we all love them. And A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance, #1. One of the things that I'll call out is Chris O'Halloran is the colorist of this book. Chris O'Halloran also colors my favorite ongoing series, Ice Cream Man. And we are going to see that there are some parallels within this book, aside from just how similar Andre Lima Araujo's art is to Martin Morazzo of Ice Cream Man. But we are in Vancouver, British Columbia, and we get the setting of the city. We're getting a lot of different parts of the city, so we know we are in almost, it seems like Chinatown, but definitely the more Asian influenced portion of the city. And after we see some of the people in the streets and the buildings, we see our protagonist that we follow as he steps out on a rainy day and darts past some people to catch a bus through the rain. And as he finally gets past all the people, we've been there before, finally sits down and has a seat. He's looking at his phone, and there is an alert on his phone. Andrew's accuser disappears. FBI say sex trafficking case open. And we also see that he is following some like directions, almost like a bus route, but a personalized one in order to get to the exact place that he needs to go. His smokes got wet, so naturally after he pushes through everybody to get off the bus, the first thing that he does is he goes to GG Mart. Now, I'm going to point something out here. Even the lettering, a few things. One, GG stands for Giant Generator, which is Rick Remender's publishing imprint. Two, the way that the G's are set up are the exact same way that they're set up in another book that I was reading today that Andre Lima Araujo did with Alice Cott, called Generation Gone. Tom Mueller, who I pointed out earlier for that Maze book variant, was the designer on that graphic designer on that Generation Gone book. And the G's are the exact same G's from Generation Gone as they used in this book for Giant Generator, which is also another trope from Ice Cream Man. If you look at products in Ice Cream Man stores, places, you'll always see that it'll be like a ICM as the company that product is made by. So Ice Cream Man vibes for sure. But as he goes in to get the smokes, bumps into someone, kind of gives it to the guy, kind of reads him the riot act a little bit as things go flying in the air, particular products. And the guy just kind of keeps a stone face with him. And finally, our protagonist realizes he kind of was a little too harsh on the guy, is a little nicer. Guy kind of forgives him and just talks about how, bad days, shitty days can sneak up on you. They exchange some pleasantries and go on, and our guy gets his smokes. He proceeds through the city, and then he comes to get back on the bus. And after talking to a young kid who was about to step on a bird, he kind of talks him out of it a little bit. But after the fact, we realize that the bird didn't end up dead. Ash, just what did you get from who our character is and kind of the setting that he's been in so far in some of his first interactions?
It's interesting kind of going back, knowing a little bit more of the character at this point than you would reading it the first time. And at this point, this character is a complete mystery. We know that he's an Asian guy, looks almost identical to Benedict Wong. And Hopefully, this might be a TV series or a movie that he gets to be in. But anyways, what I really homed in on was what I was describing in the beginning, was just the pacing. And when I consciously went panel to panel, and maintaining like a musical beat, if you will, to keep and letting that cinematic feel develop. And this doesn't always work, by the way. Everything that I'm saying, if you have a bad artist, often it's difficult to do that because they're not on rhythm. And so when you're trying to get on rhythm with them, it doesn't work, and they don't know how to actually do layouts correctly. And once you start to see comics for more than just visual rendering of the art, and you actually start, I don't want to say caring, like I think everyone cares, but when it becomes just more apparent to you, the skill set or the craft of visual storytelling, you really start to like notice even more about your favorite artists. And you'll notice that there are some artists that you go, man, I didn't really like the way they drew before, but I just know how to really tell a story. And then certain artists, you're like, man, this stuff is beautiful. I want to hang it up on my wall, but they do not know how to lay out a panel. And that's going to be your own cup of tea. But this guy, I don't know this artist from anybody coming into this book. And I noticed immediately, I was like, the sequential art is impeccable. This story, we talked earlier in the show about feeling, like a writer making you feel things.
Yeah.
I'm feeling emotions of this character just through silent panels where, you can feel that he's kind of having a stressful day. You can feel that, and then all of a sudden it starts to rain on him, and he's getting on the bus. And you can just see from his expressions and his body language, which is a difficult thing to do in just still images. And you can kind of feel like the day that he's having. And, his cigarettes are wet. And this is all very important. It's not just fluff. And when he runs into the blonde guy in the Quickie Mart, the GG Mart, and he just blows up. It all makes sense. Like it doesn't feel like, oh, what's going on? Like you kind of felt him on a fuse this whole time. Mm-hmm. And that is such fantastic storytelling to be a writer and tell the story in this way and just trust your artist to convey what you're trying to tell without having to put words and explain to the reader, where maybe he has a conversation with someone on the bus explaining how bad his day is. And you're like, oh, okay. Or having a narration box where, you have like this silent, this otherworldly narrator who's telling you, oh, and then he did this. And those are devices that can work. I'm not saying you should never do that. I'm just saying how I really appreciated that Remender decided not to go this route. And I was just compelled to follow who the character, I don't even know his name, so I'm just going to call him Wong. Like following Wong around, and I just wanted to know his story. What's he going? Why he's on a journey somewhere, and I need to know. I was hooked. What about you, Skip?
Absolutely. The pacing of it, from the introduction of the setting, to our protagonist, and just the layouts and where the camera was put to kind of present who he was and what he was going through. We know the difficulties of public transit, how it could be, especially when it's crowded. If you are a smoker, I've never been a cigarette smoker, but I've got my other vices, and I know how it can be where it's like that's your relief, and that's taken away from you because of the rain that you already had to get your shoes and your socks wet walking through, and all of those things. And then finally, when you get to the store where you're going to get your smokes and be, and at least kind of be back on track, you run smack dab into the middle of someone, and now you've been physically just like kind of beat all in that moment. And every incident just got you closer and closer to your threshold, and that one just sends you right over it. So everything about this book up until this point has been completely earned. Um, it seems like just getting through this day would be enough of a goal for this guy, minus wherever he's going. So to get to this point and have the day just get rougher and rougher and rougher, and then have that breaking point. In a way, it's almost like he kind of needed to break. He needed something else to give him permission to just let the steam off, so he can kind of bring himself back to a spot where he just comes back down, and goes through it. So yeah, I mean, from them plotting this together to the execution within the panels and all of the angles that were used, this is when comics are really, really, really showing what they have to offer as a medium.
For sure. I got more to say on this next part of the scene, so let's proceed.
Indeed. So after getting off the bus, seeing the bird that was struggling, and kind of creating a heinous act of but also, while kind of a considerate act, putting the bird out of his misery. Um, the next bus comes that he's getting off of, but there's a car that's speeding right by it, just kind of coming down the side of the street, and kind of has to dodge the bus, but he gets off of it. Now he's following his phone GPS on foot, goes up the walkway, gets over to the house and knocks and rings the doorbell, and thinks about ringing it again, and then changes his mind, kind of turns around and ends up just shaking the handle. He gets inside, and we got tea kettle going off. It looks like some food is prepped for a meal to occur. He's still got that blood from stepping on, kind of euthanizing the bird, so to speak. But like, the lights are on, it seems like no one's home, but people should be home. And as he goes through the next closest door just to try to see what's going on, you have a couple that has been brutally murdered. They are without any clothes. They look like they've been tortured. There's different things like kind of hanging out of their bodies, unfortunately. There's some Drano that's been taped to the male's mouth. The woman has all sorts of like small things been stuck into her toenails and all sorts of, I mean, it's just a horrific scene. And he's holding the tea kettle as it's going off. And as he's up there looking at those bodies in complete shock, this is not what he had for his day. He's realizing that some of those products that he's seeing, the Drano, the tape, some of the other things, are the same things that blonde guy that he ran into in the store earlier were buying, and he handed them back to him as a trying to help the guy out for them running into each other. So he darts out of the house, puts the tea kettle back, and runs out. Gets outside, throws a smoke in his mouth, and decides that he's getting out of there. But the thing is, as he was leaving footprints, because he still had that bird's blood on his foot, and he could be tagged as the person who was on the scene of that crime. And that is the end of issue number 1 of A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance. Ash, from the scene to him leaving evidence, he was there when he obviously, I mean, from our perspective, was not the person that perpetrated this crime. Where were you at that point? Did you see that coming?
No, and that was like, you could feel the panic. So rewinding back to where we stuff up, he's on the bus. He has a conversation with the kid at the bus stop, and there's a little bit of kind of like sort of like psychological or moral dilemma. The kid talks about how like, I want to put it out of its misery, but I don't even know what to do. And he's just sort of like watching it and doesn't do anything. And then everyone gets on the bus, Wong included. And then you see the bus drive away, and it goes maybe 100 feet, and it screed to a stop, and he gets off the bus, and he has to do something about it. And I think this is an extremely telling story element here. And I wanted to use this as an example about how everything that happens in this book happens for a reason. Remender doesn't waste any time just having, oh, I need to fill some pages. I'm just going to have him go to the store and talk, we're going to stand around talking about food like you see in a no, everything that happens, no matter how, innocent it seems, is for a purpose, such as we found out when he bumps into that guy in the store and we see the bag of goods drops. That is crucial to the story later. At the time, you don't know. You're just like, whatever, this is an innocuous scene. Same thing with the bird. It's like, what? Stepping on a bird. Now, this has multiple factors, however. As you read the story, it's more important than just blood being on his shoes. This also is a super strong character development. That this Wong character, as I call him, he needs to do things. He's compelled. Like, he doesn't let things just go, right? It burned at him. He couldn't stand to see the bird just suffering there on the street. And he got off the bus, and he puts the bird out of his misery, and then the bus drives off because, of course, that seems to be a theme of the book where everything just keeps going wrong. He's like, oh, man, the bus driving away. Oh, and then now, damn it, it's raining. It's like, this is like Murphy's Law story. And it's thematic for him, but I just thought it was very crucial to who we're going to find out who this character potentially is. And like Skip said, there's going to be a lot of theory because I don't necessarily know. But I feel like I have good things to work off of because of small details like that are important. And another reason why you don't want to blast through this book, because a lot of this is just in those finer points. When we get to the house later on, the tension is just there. He's knocking. You can just feel he's walking away. I'm not sure what to do. Comes back, tries the door. Hello, I'm looking for Miss Sullivan. Da da da. And he's looking at pictures, and you're like, okay, something's weird. And then you hear the teapot before anything else. Then the camera goes from the teapot sound. Wait, okay, so when we hear teapot, that clues us in someone's here, right? Because tea doesn't just make itself. Exactly. And it takes roughly about 3 to 5 minutes, I think, to bring teapot to a boil. So that means not only someone here, they were here very recently, or potentially still there, right? And so we know, because the name is Righteous Thirst for Vengeance, this isn't like a happy-go-lucky story of a family reunion. We're expecting bad things to happen. And then we zoom in on the blood on the floor, because he's stepped on that bird. He's making a track, and that all of that's going to the tension building. He sees the teapot, looks around, and he sees the food on the table. It's still warm. No one's got to eat yet. Then he discovers the couple, and it's gruesome. Like looks like those are light bulbs that were broken and then like grinded into their skin.
Yeah, it's
a really gruesome scene, but surprisingly still done in a way, the way this art style is, that it's not as graphic as it could be with a more realistic artist. Right. But it is good enough that you get the point. And then he's sitting there just, oh my God, he's in shock. I love the way this panel layout is, where he's in the middle and all these scenes are around him, and you can just imagine he's like going dizzy. Oh my, what the hell am I seeing here? And then it clues in. You see his eye. He's like, wait, wee, like here's the teapot, and it clicks in his head. The tea's going, this just happened. Like, holy shit. And the panic sets in. And then we get the scene going off to the next as he lifts the teapot off the thing. Wait a second. I remember Drano. I remember the duct tape. Oh my God. Oh my God. And the panic as he grabs a towel, he's trying to wipe off fingerprints. Oh my God, I'm here. I got to get out of here. And you feel this. That is great writing to take the reader on the journey with you. Not just know factually this is what happened, but to be a part of that journey, to feel that tension. And then he gets outside and he feels a little bit of sense of relief. And there's a nice kind of circular ending here where, it starts to rain again. But that's the least of his worries this time. And he's not even thinking about the red footprint that he left behind as he runs off. And that's such a good hook ending where you're like, oh my God. At this point, I got to the end of this book and I was like, Skip is right. And the reason I started reading this book is because this was the week you had said this was my pick of the week, and I was like, "What? Over Firepower? You're crazy!" So I went and read it, and I was like, "Yeah, that's good. it's really good." So there we go. That's the end of the first issue. I know I monopolized a lot of talk there. What do you got to say on this issue?
I mean, you nailed a lot of what I was gonna say. It's just again that like the attention to detail. With the writing, with the character acting, the facial expressions, the reactions to what he finds, and him being the person, or at least who he believes is the first person to have found these people, which could, imply that he had something to do with their demise. And of course, since he knew he didn't, he wants to erase, all evidence of him having ever been there, but he didn't catch it all. And of course, things like the car speeding down that driveway, almost running into the bus as he was arriving at that place. All of those different things, like play a role into the intrigue of this book. And these are all clues that we have to remember as readers, because we're going to be going back and referencing things later, I am sure, because we're already referencing things that happened earlier in the book with who he ran into at the store and the products that person had. So issue number 1 definitely had me locked in. I would every now and then, issue number 1 will have me like, okay, I need to follow along for the rest of this and see how things go. And that is what is leading us over to issue number 2 of A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance. So now it is just hours later. We are seeing our protagonist arrive back at the place that he was first introduced, except this time he is going into his apartment. He's thinking back to, after locking the door and looking through it and just making sure he hadn't been tailed and followed, he thinks back to the person's face that he saw in that store that he believes may have something to do with what happened. Of course, he is checking, his mail, very human thing to do. Again, there's extra panels in this book and some detailed, shots of those things. But the one that says urgent, even, he ends up throwing them all out, grabs a knife, heads over. And as he's grabbing, he goes to his desk and he moves it out of the way and reveals like a secret compartment through the floorboard and pulls out a little USB stick. And it seems like he's going to the dark web and, on his computer and looking at recent jobs that may have been taken. And sure enough, he sees a picture that resembles that couple that he had seen, that he had discovered. And it looks like it says the job was completed, and it even shows who it was, the Blue Jackal, and who the operator was, Mayor Oak. So now we see him looking for new contracts. He's using filters and such, trying to see if he knows who that. It looks like it was a hitman who did it, and he's trying to find out who they may go to next. He discovers who it is, and that's kind of where we stop. And he accepts a gig. So he has signed up himself as someone who will assist on one of these jobs. And then we go over to the next scene. But Ash, what did you think just about that part there? Him arriving back at the place, finding out that he has connections to the underworld.
That really kind of threw me a little bit because, when you pick up a comic or any book or whatever, see a movie, a lot of times you can come in with presumptions or preconceptions because, you saw the cover or the movie poster or something. So this is a book called Righteous Thirst for Vengeance. The cover of the first issue reminds me of a famous Japanese actor named Beat Takeshi. And he's got a book called Outrage, and I wish Eric Breen were here because every time I see that, I always think of him. But I thought that's what this book was like at first, and you pointed out the Benedict Wong resemblance, I think, later. But so I just started making presumptions about this, like that he's sort of some badass, not necessarily a badass, but someone who's like out for vengeance, like something happened to him. Maybe his sister was murdered and now he's going to go, get all the dudes that were involved, or I don't know. Like my brain is just because I have nothing to go on. And so when this scene happened, it kind of shattered that for a second, and I was like, oh, because it's clear here just by his facial expressions. And again, that's a great thing about the art. This guy is not a stone cold killer, right? He's not used to seeing death. And I love this scene where he's clicking through the computer screens, because again, this is just clicking through computer menu screens, and the artist manages to tell a story, and you're able to follow along, and I'm able to feel like this guy is kind of a fish out of water here. He's got access to something. I'm not sure why he's got access. Maybe this isn't even his apartment, but he's got access, and then when he clicks accept, you can see the nervousness on his face. This isn't his normal thing. He's not this assassin who takes these jobs normally. You can tell immediately without any sort of narration or dialogue or anything. Well, there's a little piece of dialogue where he mutters Jesus Christ at the end. But other than that, there's no exposition telling you, hey, Wong took the job, but it's something he didn't. There's nothing. You just get this from what you're being shown. And I loved it so much. And again, I'm on that tension of like, he's basically going to pretend to be a hitman, is what I'm assuming is happening here. And he doesn't really know what he's doing. Oh shit, and so, yeah, that's how I took it. And I loved it. Again, I'm in on the ride that this character is. And it's so entertaining. It's so fun because I feel like I can walk in their shoes a little bit. This is a great journey so far.
Absolutely. To see that he has found himself in a pit, was one thing. And then to see that he has maybe a little skin in the game, maybe in a different profession is another thing. But also to see him take himself further down the rabbit hole, even if it's for a good reason, even if he's, has seen something despicable happen and he wants to help prevent it, he's still sending himself further down this hole. And if he's not careful, and he has to be so careful, it could only lead to more potential trouble for himself. But the intrigue lengthens, the plot thickens, and we're going deeper and deeper down this rabbit hole with him. With that, we go on to the next scene where we are back at the house. It is daytime now. So the scene where he found those bodies, and now there is the ambulance. Of course, there's law enforcement, and we have one detective already on the scene, while another detective who is above his level is getting a workout in. So he jogged there instead of driving his car. But there is dialogue in this book, like Ash said, believe it or not. So he's just running it down to the officer that just arrived on the scene, like, hey, it looks like it was a professional deal. They were brutally murdered. No sign of forced entry. Doesn't look like this. Nothing was stolen, so it doesn't look like this was to take something for gain from the home. Looks like we've got some professionals on our hands because forensics isn't even coming up with very much. And based off of that, they seems like they're not going to get much from it, but let's say that leading detective that came later on the scene has forensics take a deeper look, and he himself discovers that the footprint from our protagonist. So now that we know that there is an identifier for someone who has been on the scene, they haven't been able to identify who might have actually done it, but they can potentially identify our protagonist who was on the scene. From there, he is sitting there deliberating dials 911 and is getting ready to hit the call button, and then decides not to, remembering something that he had seen when he was um, on that portal for the gig, saying police will not respond to disturbance. He ends up putting a suit jacket on, takes a walk through the city. Seems like he goes to a place where he had spent time and had fond memories. Goes and gets himself a drink. This very much feels like he's going to places that he believes he may not see um, too often in the near future. Also goes to a care home and to see his mother. Tries to have just some small talk, just checking in on her. She decides to knit the whole time and stays quiet. Silence sometimes says more than words do. And he expresses to her that he may be gone for a while and she may not see him for some time, but he feels very compelled to do something. He feels a weight on his shoulders and he believes he needs to take action for it. Finally, his mother breaks her silence, actually with action first, giving him what it was that she was knitting, and says, "Every work of art is a request for love and attention." Those are the only things that she says to him. He says, "I do love you, Mom." And from there, he walks over kind of to the reception desk, dumps out a big pouch of stacks of cash, and says, "Take care of her. I'm trusting you," to the lady. And actually, just that montage right there, Ash. What were some of the things that those scenes were kind of saying to you?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. This was him sort of reminiscing. I think these are things that are important to driving him to doing whatever he's doing. He's definitely having memories. We're, as the audience, we're not necessarily privy to what his memories are at this point, but we can see that he's bothered by things, and he's driven to do things. I mean, he's got sadness. It feels like he's got grief. I also really like before that with the 911 part, and that he's about to call. When he leaves the house, there's an umbrella clearly by the door, and he leaves and slams the door, and the umbrella is still there, like in the foreground. And this is really cool because if in the first book, multiple times, remember it was raining all the time. There was a guy on the bus that says to him, he's like, old man's like, "You should get an umbrella," and it's just one of those innocuous, offhanded comments that kind of plays. But in that book, or it was constantly like he was getting caught in the rain over and over again. It was like this thematic thing, like, oh man, when it rains, it pours. And here he presumably looks at the umbrella, and he just kind of goes, huh, and leaves without the umbrella. And I just really liked that send back. Again, paying attention to details, showing up, talking to the mom. You mentioned about like, oh yeah, there's dialogue in this book, and it's true, there is some dialogue, but what I love about it is the dialogue is not used to tell the story. Almost none of the dialogue is actually important to the plot. There's a few things like, where she says about, every work of art is a request for attention, and then he says, "I love you, Mom." So, that dialogue conveys to the reader that that's his mom. So yeah, those are some important things. But, with like the detectives at the house, a lot of the dialogue in this is really just flavor. It's really there to give personality to the characters so you kind of understand or relate to them a little better. It's not used as a crutch to like tell you what's happening. All of that is done through the art. And that's what makes this book so special to me, because I'm one of those big proponents that comics is a visual medium, and art has fell by the wayside in a lot of ways in a lot of comics, and a lot of readers just don't seem to care anymore. They're like, just give me a good story, and I'm all about having a good story, believe me. But art is part of the story. If you don't realize how important art is to the story, it's not there just to have pretty pictures. Although many comics, that's how they treat the art, and many comics just will tell stories with bad art, and then the writer will try to overcome having bad art and just let his story shine through with stick figures. And you as a reader go, well, it's fine, I guess the art sucks, it's not pretty to look at, but the story is really good. But when you can marry the two, when you can have a strong writer and an artist who can deliver that story, that's what I love about comics. That's what I love about movies too. If I just want good writing and I don't want visual, I'll read a novel, right? You can write without art. That's no question about that. But this is a medium that should be about visuals, and sometimes you might just care about pretty pictures, and I'm not going to fault anyone for that. But when you get a good story that the writing is compelling and interesting and thrilling, and that writing is being able to be conveyed through the art, I think that's where the magic happens. Sorry.
Absolutely. No. You were you were hitting all the points. And and I called it out earlier. There's additional panels. I mean, sometimes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, and also just the way that they're laid out. 2, 6, like 9 panels. In very good format, and like I said, really moving the camera around, taking the proper angles, showing body language, facial expressions. The I just it feels so good to get a book like this. This book almost feels like a Jim Jarmusch film. It almost feels a little like The Limits of Control to me. A movie with like so little dialogue, and even some repetitive dialogue, but the shots and the expression on the lead characters' faces and some of the supporting cast and all that just plays such a big role if you just like sit down and be a tea bag, and like just sit in the hot water of this book. You and the water start to fuse, together. How much of the tea is water and how much of the water is the herbal, essence that is leaked out. Books like this make me feel like that. They pull me in more and make me feel like, gosh, maybe I'm a bystander on the street. Was I tailing the protagonist to see what he was doing?
Yeah,
You love
for
it.
sure.
All right, and to take us home, here we are. He arrives at the scene, takes a look at his phone. Same data as what we saw on his computer earlier. Never Romero, Prince Ave, 95 3B. And just as he's walking towards the door, he hears a whistle, looks over, and there's another person there, pulls up his shirt, and he's brandishing a little firearm. And then the guy says to him, "Mayor Oak is my friend too." Again, leading back to seeing him filtering jobs by Mayor Oak earlier at his computer. And then the guy brings him over into the alley to talk. He's nervous. He's sweating. The guy's got a weapon. He doesn't. He doesn't know what's going to happen. The tension breaks and the guy pulls out some pills and they help get the blood flowing. So that way, your heart's not beating so fast, so hard, during the gig. And the guy's doing all the talking. Our protagonist doesn't know what the pills do, but the guy is talking as if he knows exactly because he believes this guy is experienced. He even goes as far to call our protagonist big time and says, "Hey, you weren't supposed to be here for some hours, but there's no reason that we can't go early, right?" Right. So they start heading up to 3B. Protagonist's heart is beating out of his chest because he ended up not taking some of the pills. And they pick the lock. They are able to get inside, and there's some music playing. They get around the corner and see that the lady is just blissfully kind of dancing in her kitchen as she's making food. Next time I cook, I need to be dancing like this, Ash. I don't know if you dance when you cook food,
No,
but
I don't.
all right. And we got to literally take a page out of this book. But in all of her bliss, as she's snapping her fingers and the camera's moving around, we got musical notes all around. The guy, other than the protagonist, his eyes say murder in them, and the protagonist's eyes just say, "I'm watching something happen that I'm supposed to stop, and I'm not sure if I can." She's cutting up food on her cutting board, must have felt the presence of people turn around, flips her cutting board because she sees that she has company. And the other guy stops the music, and it's him and our protagonist back to back facing her. and he's got the weapon out of his waistband now, holding it down. And all he says, again with the sinister look on his face, is "Lucky girl," with our protagonist nervous. We're not sure what he's going to do. And that is the end of issue number 2. Ash, take it away.
The tension is palpable. And then we talked about how like the writer doesn't rely on dialogue. And of course, as soon as I say that, there is a scene here where the dialogue is kind of crucial. Again, it's not really telling you the story, but it becomes important. Here, the dialogue is when he's giving him the pills. And he's like, it gets the blood going. Not that I need to tell you. Paper says it's both of us, before and after. He hands him the pills. Man's sweating. Okay, didn't mean to offend. You're the big time. Look, we're both in this now. And what I liked about this is, again, in very few words, without any exposition, it tells us that this hitman, I'm going to call this guy the hitman, thinks that Wong, the protagonist I'm calling Wong, is some guy that Wong isn't, right? Wong, presumably, what this whole scene told me, you say a picture is worth 1,000 words. This scene told me that Wong accessed the dark web on someone else's account, presumably some badass hitman guy who, who's big time. That's not him. And he's taken a job that's not really for him. He's taken someone's identity essentially, but he's a fish out of water. You can see he's sweating like a pig. He's nervous as hell. But the hitman guy doesn't know that. He's never seen him before, so he's just like, yeah, you're this badass, guy that I've heard about, his reputation only. So whatever. That's kind of how it conveys to me. And I love that it never is that said anywhere in the book. I am just communicated through that, through the story, through the pictures and the word, or the talking. And I love that Remender, again, the pacing. We talked about Lemire being the pace master, but Remender here is he's like, don't count me out. I'm going for that championship belt. The pacing in this book is impeccable, and the way that he shows restraint in getting to the scene. He's like, hey, look, the music's going to get there. It's not time for the crescendo yet. And the way it builds up in that hallway, and we see the chest is beating, and you just let the panels go beat by beat. Don't rush it. Play it through. Let it. Also, I like the little in the background, the umbrellas. I'm not sure how, but that seems to be
a theme.
Yeah, that is umbrellas. And it's just, man, the emotion. When I read this book, because of the first one, I knew what I was in for, and I just took my time. I put on some, I can't remember what I played for the music for this book, but I put on something that was kind of like suspenseful, that's another thing great too, Skip. Playing music to reading is that helps you kind of keep the beats, because music is natural for that. I was gripped. This whole scene where she's cutting, what's going to happen. These killers, she is not aware that the killers are there. And then it's not just that, it's also this Wong guy. He doesn't want to kill her. You can tell that this is not what he does. But is he going to sit there and let her die? Right? Or is he going to interfere with this hitman? Is he going to be scared too? Because he's not necessarily a killer. We don't have a reason necessarily to think he's a killer. This is a tense, kind of a three-way position. But it goes back to the first book. Remember when he steps on the bird? We know that Wong is a guy who can't just let things go. Right? He had to let that bird go out of its misery. He missed his bus ride. He could have just easily. So this is a guy of some manner of conviction. Something burns in his heart. So knowing that informs me about this book and go, I can't believe Wong's just going to sit there and watch this guy kill her. Something's going to go down. But what? What about you? Are you on the same page, or are you seeing it different?
No, that's absolutely it, man. I'm seeing the same thing. It's just, everything that got us up until this point, and, him throwing himself into this, while not really having a plan, just having, a notion and being compelled to do this, or at least it seems like that for now. Um, it leaves us off at this place where, I mean, we're just waiting. We're just like, what are you gonna do? Like, you've come this far. Is it option A where you know grab like start choking the dude from behind. You end up like getting into a wrestling match and tussling, and then eventually like grab her knife or her board that she flipped over and take action with that? Or is it and then you dispatch this guy and end up talking to her, maybe trying to find out from her who could be after you? Or is it B, like he ends up not being able to react in time, he just kind of free tenses up and she ends up getting taken out, and now he's got to continue to lie to this hitman dude and try to get some information from him on maybe the last gig that he did, and to see if he's tied in with the gig that already happened. We really don't know, but I'll be damned, Ash, if we both don't want to stick around and find out what's going to happen in issue number 3.
This book has hooked me bad. Like, I feel like I need to, as soon as I can get my hand on issue 3, I can't wait to crack open that page and find out where this goes. This is completely unpredictable for me, and I love that. I don't necessarily mind. Some people I hear often will criticize certain stories because like, oh, I've seen that before, or yeah, I was able to predict it. I knew where it was going. I'm not one of those people, to be honest. I'm very much okay with a predictable story. I'm one of those people that I love execution. Like, for example, the movie Cars by Pixar, right?
Mm-hmm.
20 minutes into that film, you're like, oh, this is Doc Hollywood. Like, if you've seen Doc Hollywood, you know exactly what Cars is going to be. Like, it's almost identical. But I didn't care because Cars was executed so damn good. Like, I'm on the ride. I don't care. Like, I'm totally cool with it. This, though, that doesn't mean that I don't respect originality and I don't respect taking me on a ride where I can't predict. And this book is doing that. Like, I have no idea what's going to happen in the next issue. None. Like, I love that. I'm like, I must know. And I'm so invested in this story because I've been following and feeling what this character's going through that I can't get off. It's like I don't want to say a train wreck because that's used to talk about terrible things, but it's in the sense of the train wreck is something you can't turn away from. That's this book. I cannot turn away. I'm glued to it.
Same, my friend. Same.
Whew. Well, you guys that are listening, this was a long episode because we went into 2 issues, and so we went. This book needed that coverage. I think this was a fun book to cover in the format that we do because it didn't rely on dialogue. I felt like
Absolutely.
I felt like we could talk about the book and what was going on by just describing the scenes. And because of that, like the story was just able to be conveyed just by describing it. Like, anyways, I hope you guys are listening. If you haven't been on this train ride that this book is, that you consider this. This is a book that I am excited to get. There are books that I'm just, I'll just wait for the trade because whatever. But waiting for the trade has its advantages, especially on miniseries, because it's like, oh, there's 5 issues and it's done, and then I can just get the trade and get the whole story in one book, and that's great. But in a series like this, one of the advantages of getting it month after month is that slow drip. It's like you get it, and it's like, oh, it's so good, and then a month later, it's like, here's some more. And if you have 12 issues of it, you went a year of being on that ride rather than getting a trade and like reading it in an hour and being like, that was exciting for an hour, and now I move on and do something else. So this is a book that I'm happy to be getting in single issues precisely for that reason. What about you?
Yeah, definitely. This is the type of book that does well for me issue to issue. And I want more comics that I can read issue to issue. I'm fine with, I have no problem with trades, but if I can get one that just keeps me on the edge every issue, oh man, and then I get to come on here and talk about it with you. Thank you, Rick Remender. And thank you, Andre Lima Araujo, as well as Chris O'Halloran and my guy, Russ Wooten. Fantastic work, y'all. Erica Schnatz, too. Erica Schnatz, did your thing.
And this is another great example of trying things out that aren't necessarily your cup of tea. I didn't get this book when it originally came out. And I saw the art and I was like, it's not necessarily ugly art, but it's not necessarily my style. I was attracted to the title and how it reminded me of like the Beat Takeshi films.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, in a comic book, I don't know. And Rick Remender, I'm not on the Rick Remender bandwagon. I think he's a talented writer, but he tends to write stuff so far that I've been exposed to, and I have definitely a lot of his stuff to still read, that hasn't immediately like grabbed me. I was like, oh,
Right.
I read Deadly Class. I was like, it's fine. It's not for me. I read a little bit of Scumbag. It's fine. Not for me. So I was like, Rick Remender's not one of my he's not like Ed Brubaker where I'm just like a must buy, like,
Right.
So, but you had said such high things about it. And I was like, I need to try this. And that first book, I was like, boom. Yep. You sold me. Like this is great. And talking with you now about it, I'm even more invested because I feel like I sorted my thoughts out, right? Like I feel like I had all these feelings about the book, but they were kind of jumbled. And this discussion has helped me kind of organize and really nail down, like, yeah, this is what I like. That's, oh yeah. And it just made me even more excited for the book. And I love great comics. Like we need more. Expect better. So before one of the final things that we do before ending the show, we're going to just talk about next week's books, maybe throw some recommendations out for you guys, what Skip and I might point you to getting coming out next Wednesday. Skip, do you see anything on the screen that you want to point out to for maybe, just anyone to give some attention to?
I would definitely take a look into that vinyl series. It is the 6th and final issue. From what I understand, it has been one heck of a ride. Again, another story that has to do with music in a significant way, but not in the way you would probably think. Actually deals with some serious mental illness that affects people at older ages. But the way that everything comes together is so meaningful, and it plays a role. You find out about it in the first issue, and then it plays a role all the way through. And it is a wild book. So, but the dialogue is like right where it needs to be. And the illustrations are awesome. Dave Stewart colors it, so the colors are vibrant and popping. And it has been a heck of a ride. Ash, what are you seeing on this list that you're going to be checking out next week?
So, well, I'm a collector of Oblivion Song. I'm sad it's coming to an end. It's kind of hard for me to recommend anyone jump on at the very end. However, it is fully available in trade paperback forms, so you can jump on this wonderful sci-fi ride that is super plot driven. If you are a plot person, like if you like stories that are like what's going on and slowly peel back the onion of like, oh geez, this is gonna be a book I think you might enjoy. It's got a little bit also of like Walking Dead if you like sort of that ensemble cast of a ton of characters and their relationships with each other are all complicated. This is, Kirkman wrote both these books, so it's a fantastic book. I did get House of Slaughter #1. #2's coming out. I haven't read Slaughter #1 yet, so I can't really make any comments. I think that's a book that people either know that's for them or not. I do want to shout out Gunslinger Spawn, even though I'm not a big Spawn guy. Props to the Todd father. $2.99 for his books.
Yeah.
$2.99. And Wild West Spawn. That cover looks really freaking sweet. So, I think also people know if they're Spawn people or not. But it's a good time to jump on. It's issue number 2. I don't really believe DECORUM will actually be coming out, despite what it says there.
Yep, same.
but Skip and I that started the show on DECORUM. We're on episode 22 of the show, and DECORUM is only up to issue 8. So that should tell you something. But we definitely both really enjoy this book. We're both really waiting for it. I hope that it is worth the wait. And one of the books that you got me on, Skip, Echolands, issue number 4 is coming out here. And I have the first 3 issues. I'm enjoying this book. It is very art-driven, very much. It and in a different way than we just talked about. This is more of the buy it for the pretty pictures, I think. It's but they are very pretty, and it has a very interesting format in the way that it's a landscape instead of portrait. So you turn the book sideways, but the staples are along the vertical side, not the top. So it doesn't open up like a calendar, like a lot of books that have tried this in the past. It opens up still, on the left-hand side are the staples, and it's very like giant widescreen format. And the way the art utilizes this format is spectacular, and it's just gorgeous. When you have this book in your hand, you will feel like it's worth it. Like you got your money's worth with this book. The publication quality is extraordinary. The art is just jaw-dropping gorgeous. What you see on the covers is exactly what you get on the inside. It's no lesser quality. The writing is so far kind of simplistic. It's not that it's bad. It's just light. They're not writing Shakespeare here. They're telling a simple fantasy story, some characters on the run from some bad guys. And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. Like, sometimes comics, you just want a nice popcorn ride and something beautiful to look at. So, Echolands.
Absolutely. I'll be grabbing that one. Continue to enjoy that story. It is. And all the different art styles within it for all the individual characters. So cool.
Anything else on that row that you want to recommend to anyone or point out?
I read issue number 1 and 2 of Sweet Paprika, but I decided to wait for the rest of the story to be finished. But if you're looking just for kind of a cute but adult style, kind of romantic type thing, that will definitely do it for you. Mirka is very charming in how she puts those stories together, so they're not run of the mill.
All right. Well, on the next grouping here, Asagio Jimbo is basically going to be on permanent recommend for me. It is on issue 24, and you can really jump into an Asagio Jimbo anytime. It's not like one giant story. It's very much told in parables, if you guys know what those are. Oftentimes one issue, maybe 2 or 3 at most. Every once in a while, Stan Sakai will do this like 6-part story, but most of the time it's just simple. Like Usagio Jimbo's a wandering Ronin going across Japan, and he has adventures and he meets people, and it's the art is very cartoony, but the stories are very serious, but they're serious in a very PG way. So it's written for adults but appropriate for children is kind of the way that I put it. And it's a great comic that you can share with your kids if you have kids. They may actually love it. My neighbor, my good friend actually, and he's also an Usagio fan. Usagio Jimbo fan. He lets his how old is she? I think she's 9-year-old daughter. She loves Usagio Jimbo too. So it's a great book. I'm a huge proponent. I've been reading this book for 35 years. And I'm just going to keep shouting it out. What about you, Skip? Anything here that needs attention?
I think that's it for me for the most part. Yeah. Oh, Fight Girls. I almost didn't realize
Yeah, I
Fight
was
Girls
gonna
number
say.
5 comes out. I think it's the conclusion to the story last issue. Talk about some intrigue. I'm surprised how much Frank Cho has been able to make me second guess and not be able to predict exactly what's gonna happen at the end of this book. And I think we're gonna get a few different twists at the end of it. So if you haven't been reading Fight Girls, it may from the covers and from what you know of Frank Cho, may not seem like there's all that much to it, but there's more than meets the eye with that book.
For sure. And it's fun.
It is.
It's a page turner. Like that's one of the things about this. I expected nothing from this book. I was like, it's gonna be Frank Cho drawing hot chicks, like whatever. Right. But no, this would be a fun movie. It's so far, I don't know how he's gonna stick the landing yet, but each issue, in my opinion, has gotten better than the next or the last. So I think that's good praise.
Indeed.
Seeing if there's anything else that I would throw out to recommend. There's probably some really good books in here that I just don't know about. I'm not seeing necessarily anyone in the chat shouting out their recommends, but that's what we got, guys. So read more independent comics. I know the love for Marvel and DC. I was a Marvel guy my whole life. I still am. I love these characters. They always have a dear place in my heart. When I got back into comics in 2018, I jumped on the DC bandwagon and honestly fell in love with a lot of those characters that for many years I had just kind of dismissed. And, but they're in a lull right now. And I'm not telling you to not like those books, but if you're feeling that they're just not doing it for me anymore, and you're like, I'm not really an indie person, I get it. I was the same way. And in some ways, I still am. The reason I love comics is I love those universes. I want the Marvel universe. But that doesn't mean that I can't appreciate a good story outside. And so I'm not going to overlook it. And I'm excited about indie books today just because they're far and away better. Look, I'm not going to lie. I wish Marvel was writing comics as good as A Righteous Search for Vengeance. That would be my bag. I'd be like, oh, awesome.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to snub my nose up on this book just because it doesn't have a Marvel character in it. So, anyways, give those a try. I think everyone should read good comics. Keep your enthusiasm up. If you don't have a comic, when you come home from the comic store on a Wednesday, if you don't have comics in your bag that you're just like, I can't wait to read this, you need to reevaluate which comics you're buying. Because I don't say that to look down my nose at anyone. I say that because I was in that rut. For a while, I was trying to convince myself that these are the books, and I was sticking with them, and I was being loyal. And eventually, I just had to admit to myself, these books aren't doing it for me. And as I started purging my pull list and doing it, and it took a couple of years, to be honest, to really get it. But now, the books that I get, every single one of them, I'm just like, yes, this is awesome. So hopefully you guys could feel like that too. Skip, do you have any final thoughts that you want to say before we tell the kids goodnight?
Yeah, make sure that your comic experience, like Ash said, is one that you're excited about and one that you can't wait to get to, and not a chore. If it's a chore, if it's oh, I gotta get through these books, then there's probably some books out there that are better worth your time and your money. So, take some chances and take a look around. But we appreciate our community very much for actually being open-minded to indies, following us, as we're reading these books and sharing their thoughts, and also sharing indies with us, because we've had books that have been featured on the show due to recommendations from people in our community. So thanks to everyone who shows up. Thanks to everyone who's contributed. Thanks to y'all who are here with us on the late night tip. We appreciate y'all, to Helam and Ed, and everyone that stopped by the show today, and all of you who are listening or watching the VOD after the fact. We appreciate everyone's time. We appreciate the comments, and can't wait to do the next one.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you guys for being here. And don't forget, if you do have great comics, if you're like, oh, but Ash, I'm on the same page. All the books I read, I love. I'm super. That's great. Share them. Let other people know, because you guys know it's hard to find the great books. The marketing is terrible. Sometimes all my favorite books I'm reading right now, someone recommended to me, and I would have never found them had someone not urged me to give them a try. So I think it's important that you share it. Tell people about your favorite books.
Indeed.
All right, so that's it. Thanks you guys for joining us on a late night episode. We're going to sign off, and next week is Criminal Cast. So we'll be covering, what is the book that we're covering, Skip?
Wrong Place, Wrong Time.
That's it. I couldn't recall. Wrong Place, Wrong Time. If you're not reading Ed Brubaker, you're doing comics wrong. Read the trade paperback Wrong Place, Wrong Time, or it's tell the kids what the two issues are that they can get instead.
This would be volume 7, which was only released through Image, so you can look for that trade. It's kind of like a purple bluish. Or if you already have the singles, it is Criminal 10-year anniversary, and it's and then the other issue is Criminal Special Edition. Both of them are more white covers with the red criminal across. One of them just has Teague, and the other one is Teague and a car from kind of an upper view. So if you've got the singles, read those two. If you are looking for the volume, then it's volume 7, which was only released through Image with like a bluish kind of purplish cover. And if you have the hardcover for the Criminal Deluxe Volume 3 hardcover, then both of those issues are in there as well. So also we have the digitals online for Comixology. Find it where you can, read it however you can, and then come talk about it with us next week. Me, Ash, and Eric Breen will be here breaking down some Criminal for y'all. So stop by.
Yeah, every last Wednesday of the month. Approximately should be 8 p.m. Pacific time, I believe. But take a look out for that. Criminal's great. And then afterwards, we'll return back to the Unnamed Indie Comic Show. And look forward to seeing you guys. Thanks for joining us tonight.